In this video, I want to go over some of the specifics about the final write-up for the equipment proposal. So I talked about the setup for all of this in the previous video on the proposal, which is due next week. But I want to talk about some of the specifics of the write-up. So this is not some gigantic final paper. It's really just 5 sections, each of which is a couple paragraphs. So this does not need to be some 20-page monster of a paper that you might have for other classes. Again, this is supposed to be something that you might send to your boss or your supervisor at a sports institute or a rehabilitation clinic. So there's going to be 5 sections. They roughly track what those questions were in the proposal. So section 1, just describe the equipment and what the purpose of this equipment is. So how does it work? What do you use it for? Section 2, describe how this equipment might help you achieve clinical or performance outcomes that are relevant for your clinical or sports application. What kind of people would benefit from this equipment? Maybe also how will this equipment go beyond what you might normally expect to find at a typical PT clinic or sports training center. Then number 3, the most important, I think, section, or at least the most points in this section, part of the write-up, you are going to provide a mechanical analysis of this equipment. So apply topics from this class, and specifically something from Unit 1, Unit 2, and Unit 3 from this class to describing how this equipment works and how it will help clients achieve whatever performance or clinical outcomes that you care about. Now, you don't need to apply every single topic we've covered, just something from each of these 3 units. So because this is going to be venturing out into potentially new or uncommon or innovative equipment, there won't necessarily be a single correct answer I'm looking for. You will often in your career find situations where reasonable people can come to different conclusions about a piece of equipment. However, and I'll extrapolate on this later, there is I'll go into detail on this later. There is a difference between a reasonable analysis that somebody might disagree with and something that's not mechanically sound or, as I put it here, not obviously wrong. So you do need to apply topics correctly in your mechanical analysis of this. And then in section 4, I'm asking you to summarize a couple of scientific studies that are relevant for your equipment analysis. Now, these might be scientific studies on your specific equipment of interest, but they also might not. They could be something that's generally relevant to the mechanics or to the outcomes that you care about. So, for example, if you're trying to strengthen a specific muscle group for a specific kind of sport, you could talk about some study that showed the relationship between strength in that muscle group and performance or injury avoidance or something else relevant to your application. Both in section 4 and in section 3, you can include figures if you want to, but you do not have to. They're not required. And then section 5 references, this is just because you'll be citing a couple scientific studies, just put in some references. I don't particularly care what reference citation format you use. Anything that is reasonable is fine. Do make sure your scientific studies are from a peer-reviewed journal. So easiest way to find that would be searching on something like Google Scholar. If you have a question about whether a reference is or a study is legit or not, you can just ask me. So those are the 5 sections that are in the final project write-up. Some things to remember. I mentioned this in the last video, but please choose something interesting, something new or uncommon. Don't just choose a squat rack or a walking cane that's you see everywhere and everybody kind of knows how they work. Like I said in the last video, choose something related to mechanics, not maybe like physiology, like a heart rate monitor. Maybe not a good choice. Please include some, in your mechanical analysis, please include some concepts from each of the 4 units, or each of the 3 units we've done so far. So that would be joint motion, joint function, medical imaging from Unit 1, tendons, cartilage, ligaments, stress strain, overuse injury, acute injury from Unit 2, and then all this stuff about muscle behavior and structure from Unit 3. So I know this is a final write-up project for a class, but I do want you to imagine in terms of how you'd write this up. This is something that maybe your boss at a PT clinic or your head coach that you work for as a strength and conditioning coach, or the head athletic trainer or something like that might read. So try and strike a balance between something that's professional but not overly academic. I think maybe one mistake people make is writing up everything as if it's a final paper on Shakespeare. That's very staid and academic. Really do your best to clearly and succinctly explain what you're talking about, but still in a professional way. Relevant to that also, as you might know, doctors and PTs and coaches and other people you might work with in the future are busy people, so don't be overly wordy. I don't have any specific length requirements beyond the recommendations of 1 to 2 paragraphs here, 1 to 2 paragraphs here, 2 to 3 paragraphs here, 2 to 3 paragraphs here. So you can be a little soft in your definition of what a paragraph is, but your explanations should be sufficiently detailed, but not overly wordy. And again, if you're wondering about exactly where you fall on that, you can just ask me. And I'll be happy to provide feedback before this is due. Another thing that maybe another bad habit you might have developed is trying to cram in more words and more sentences that are in the vicinity of maybe possibly correct, but especially in something technical like writing up a mechanical analysis of a piece of equipment, it's really important to make sure that everything is mechanically sound. So not wrong. Don't apply a potentially dubious analysis to your equipment. Better to stick with something that's more straightforward and correct versus trying to cram in more words for the sake of having more stuff in it. So your mechanical analysis is going to be graded on whether it's mechanically sound, and by that I just mean that you are applying the concepts correctly and that you're demonstrating that you know what you're talking about vis-a-vis the material from this course. So an example of something that isn't mechanically sound would be claiming that some stretching device that would improve muscle force because it would lengthen your muscle fibers beyond their optimal length. Well, we know that that's not mechanically sound because if your muscle fibers are longer than their optimal length, they won't be able to produce as much force. So that would be a mechanically unsound argument. So then lastly, if you have questions about this or if you want feedback, please feel free to just email me and I'll be happy to provide feedback on this. So hopefully you enjoy doing this project. Hopefully you'll find it interesting. Again, this is due last week of classes. That proposal, which is due next week, is just graded on completion. So good luck. I hope you enjoyed, and let me know if you have questions on this project.